That's
Amen.
good stuff right there.
Yeah.
That's the thing, man.
I wish I was plugged in. It's not. I was like, dang it.
Yeah.
I wonder if is it plugged in? Hold on. It'd be rad if it was. Can you hear that or no?
Yes.
Nice.
Be right for Jesus.
New theme song. This has been Be Rad for Jesus. You're rad. I'm not Jesus.
Welcome to the Be Rad for Jesus podcast. Today we are talking about, of course, Roe v. Wade and the sanctity of life and all that goes around about that. This is an episode you may want to listen to and may really want to dig in and just explore with us what you think about this. Consider all the angles as we're talking, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments or on the voicemail. There's links to all of that on the episode page. Let us know. Leave us a voicemail. What do you think? Comment on social media or on one of our channels. Shoot us an email. Let us know your thoughts on all of this. We'd love to hear from you if you're listening to this and you have thoughts on that, or just leave us a 1-star review, because those are fun. And
But if you leave a
anyway,
1-star review, you have to leave a voicemail.
yeah, no spam trolling guy who 1-starred my church. Okay, anyway, 1-star
the
reviews
worst.
are lame. The best part is the guy lives in Oklahoma, so he's clearly not been to my church in Nevada, and he knows it. And he trolled me and then got upset. But all of that aside,
he's probably one of those evangelical atheists.
yeah, for real. I think so. But anyway, Scott, it's good to have you with me. I'm Brian Lucas. I'm one of your hosts. Scott Lucas, my little brother, is with me as always. He's our co-host.
Now with
And
more video.
Now with more video, with twice the video and half the structure. Okay. All right.
I'll take it. I'm Scott Lucas. Here's me face.
Hey, Scott's real. He's not just a photo. So somebody said that about my wife that has known me for years now, and we ran into him at the Thrive conference we just went to, and they were like, "Oh, I need to silence all notifications so I don't just keep getting random.
I should, yeah.
Do not disturb."
I should turn my phone on like just no vibrate mode, because otherwise it might hop off of the precarious. Yeah, just boom, boom. Yeah.
That's the best. Thunk.
Yeah.
What?
I love when you put your phone on something, you're like listening to something, and then it's like, and then
Yeah.
like across the floor.
Yeah.
It's so radical. All right.
Okay.
So should we Twitch stream a video game too while we're here? I feel like that's what we should be doing.
Is that what's happening? Dude, TikTok just activated Twitch, like video game streaming like that. Like you can stream from Twitch into TikTok. So you can take your same multicam feed and put it onto and TikTok Live as well, and go like full, like it's the only way to do a third-party camera into the feed. But they, unless you're like big money, you know, like the X Games can put their stuff on.
Right.
But if you stream anything, if you use that feature and you stream anything that's not video games, they give you a warning if you click on that option, and it's like, if you stream anything other than video game content using this feature, we will ban your account.
Why?
Like, I don't know. They just want it to be for gaming. They don't want people to be able to do like, because I was like, dude, it'd be great to be able to do like multicam stuff like this where I can control it better and have graphics and that kind of thing. And they're like, absolutely not.
Huh.
So, like next best thing is like the same way that people were pulling off streaming to Instagram, which is through something like Yellow Duck or something like that, where you have an emulator that's pretending to be your phone. But TikTok's really aggressive against those. I don't know why though. They're weird about a lot of stuff though, and they keep upping the thing. The more people that qualify for their layers of stuff, the more they move the goalposts.
Oh,
so
I don't think I thought about maybe downloading TikTok onto like an old phone that I factory reset, because it's just insidious. I heard, it needs so many.
Yeah.
Like it's such a weird. I don't know. This is kind of tinfoil hat, but I think it would make sense. It's like I guess, TikTok in China is like kids doing STEM activities.
Yeah.
And then TikTok in America is like, a blue-haired kid telling you're a demi boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, so it's just like, I'm like, I mean, that would make sense. It'd be like a new form of warfare, like softening a culture,
Yeah.
But, I don't know. That's, like I said, it's a little tinfoil hat, but that's one where I'm like, I think that's probable. That seems like a probable thing.
Yeah.
Because if you're just talking about two countries, like one way to get a country, that you are competing with in many ways to be less competitive is to just do something that, or encourage, it's not like they single-handedly made us dependent on social media, but they're making it, I think if TikTok's algorithm is designed to make you more and more inflamed, then that's bad. But I mean, it's kind of like Instagram Reels.
Yeah. Well,
like Instagram learned pretty quick. Like I get so bored if it's like, another girl showing her butt, I'm just like, cool. Not interested.
And that's what,
not interested.
Yeah.
Not
That's how the algorithm works. But the thing that's funny about like TikTok, the thing you just mentioned about it being kind of rage driven,
right.
in a way, is that it comes from the algorithm. The algorithm is going to pick up whatever you engage with the most. It's going to keep feeding you that. And so when you see something that drives you crazy and you're like, heck no, and then you respond to it and then you comment on it and then you share it with 10 other people who hate it,
then they're like, want to see 10 more of those?
Yeah, exactly. And so those are all my whether it was intentional or not, the more inflammatory vibe of the video I make on TikTok, the bigger it goes. And so the stuff I have that was really controversial, like got near 100,000 views, and the stuff where it's just like really encouraging, just like, man, this was a time when somebody said something great to me. What about you? It's like 10 people are like, okay. And nobody wants to share that. It's like,
but that's where, I think the guy from, that made the documentary, whatever it's called, Social Dilemma.
Supersize Me. Oh yeah.
Him too. He was saying how if that's what the algorithm rewards, he's like, it's absolutely insane to think that you can't make an algorithm that rewards subtlety and like thought and like nuance.
Well, no,
of course you could make.
It's cheaper and easier to make one that.
Yeah, but it's so funny that it's like nobody's willing to fight that fight because,
right.
But and then I don't know. I just now heard or was listening to a story about how Elon's Twitter deal got put on hold. And then all these Twitter users are, like who are, politically one way or the other, either like people who are libertarian or right wing are gaining hundreds of thousands of followers, like in the days before Elon, they were supposed to give due diligence or something like that. And they had previously lied about how many bots there are on Twitter.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, only 5% of it, or less than 5% of users are bots. And so basically what they were saying is like that it could be that Twitter has been lying to shareholders and lying to their users to make their ideological, standpoints seem more popular than they are. Mm-hmm. And that this buyout process caused, a due diligence, like a huge amount of auditing. Mm-hmm. And, that is a huge issue because if they're, if they were lying about that stuff, then it's going to be brought to light. And so, it's an interesting, time to be alive because then you can see that like with TikTok or whatever, it's not just inflammatory for the sake of being inflammatory. There's inflammatory for the sake of profit,
right? And
there's inflammatory for the sake of, getting my point across and silencing people I don't like. And it does, everybody complains about being silenced on both sides. So you can't just say anecdotally that they are silencing only right-wing viewpoints or only conservative or only left-wing and only, liberal. It seems to be across the board, but from what I've understood, it seems that there's a lot of stuff where if you were to take a stance on Roe v. Wade currently, and say, whatever you think about it, and it's not anything other than burn down the courts, then they might be able to say, well, we don't want to push that sort of stuff. And so, that's where the what I like about Elon's proposed takeover was, I just want to make things more transparent so why something's getting downvoted,
Right.
Because it doesn't make sense to me at all. Like, I don't think the average person, if you say, do you think the like Donald Trump should not have a Twitter account, but ISIS should,
Right.
Like that's, I don't even care what you think about Donald Trump. That's not sensible to anybody at all. That's just a silly thing.
And there have been multiple revolutions formulated through, the whole thing it was a while ago now, but in Egypt that happened through Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, or it wasn't WhatsApp, it was something like that, I think. And then Twitter was how the Egyptian coup happened a while back. And so that kind of stuff, it's like, if you're going to allow that level of craziness to occur, then you kind of have to go across the board. Otherwise, it sets a really, really weird agenda bias that, is really obvious there. Although then, even on things like where like Parler, a bunch of people were fleeing normal social media to that one because that's supposed to be the unbiased free one. And then a bunch of liberal accounts went there and set up stuff, and they were like, cool, yeah, like it blocks everything, it banned my account, it does it, and so they're like, it's the exact same thing, only worse, just on their side, so it's okay. The funny part is that they fully explored that without acknowledging the hypocrisy in complaining about being censored over here when they feel good about it when it's on their side. And that lack of logic, I think, is one of the big issues in our community, in our country, in our culture right now, is the inconsistencies. If you feel that way, that's fine, but be consistent. And then we can address it. But like, if you're going to hop around and change your position every time somebody disagrees with you, and then at the same time, you're going to be upset with any, imagined inconsistency on the other side, that's not, that's not cool. There's a lot of logical fallacies in aggressive positioning.
My wife and I were talking about, I read a post because, Roe v. Wade, first of all, nobody understands what Roe v. Wade actually does, which is sad. This whole even if this decision goes through, it's not like abortion is illegal. It just goes back to the state's rights to decide, which in a lot of cases means you cannot get one after like 5 weeks or 10 weeks or something. I can't remember.
It depends on the state. Everything, it ranges everywhere from like 6 to 20 to beyond.
So so that's one issue, but so my wife and I were talking about this, just driving somewhere, because I saw somebody post something that basically said, this is, I think her name's Judith Butler. She was in like the 70s. She wrote this argument that became like the reason why people want to defend, or one of the best articulated reasons why people want to defend abortion. And she basically argued that if you, strapped a, amazing concert violinist to a woman for 9 months and, told her that she alone could save this violinist by being hooked up to this violinist who's like a singular gift in mankind.
Yeah.
That, that lady doesn't, the woman doesn't owe anything to that concert violinist, she doesn't owe them anything. So that was kind of the issue. So I saw somebody post like a much weaker, much more inflammatory and frankly disgusting version of that, which was, it doesn't matter when life starts, like at all. You could tell me that a baby is alive at 8 months in the womb, and that mother owes that baby nothing. It's still her body, still her right. And I was just like, and I almost commented, but I want to like maintain a relationship with this person.
Yeah.
But I was like, I almost got on there and was just like, hey, if people are like putting babies into women, that's absolutely true. If they're just getting in there somehow, like someone else is putting a baby in your womb, dude, we got to riot, because this is not okay. Like babies are just showing up. No, this is absolutely, but that's never going to happen. And it's never happened before, and it's not going to happen in the future.
Right.
There's no way that's possible. And so Yeah. So then Katie and I were talking about this, just like, and then we got to a place, I can't remember exactly where, but like we hit this point where it's like, she was watching a show in which it was like set in the 60s where they were dealing with abortion in the UK. Yeah. And like how some people could afford it. Some people could afford it. Some people can't, and whatever. And she's like, yeah, like, where do you draw that line? And I'm like, look, I think that's where the healthy debate should be, is just like, is there ever a time, could I always say never, 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 never? Because there are things that I'm like, if I were in charge, here's what I would do, know? But there's a place where, with all this stuff, social media, our current political climate, it just makes it hard to ever say yes, but no, and. Right. It's this guy had to feel like he had to post this. Here's you could stab a baby in the head as it comes out of the womb. That's not killing a baby. That's still a woman's body. And I'm like, okay.
That see, what I mean? And that's like, what I'm talking about with the consistency. Like be consistent, because even I've seen a whole slew of arguments about when life begins and how the priority has to be. There's like three categories to this. One of them is, when does life begin? One of them is the autonomy of a woman, like women's health rights, that it's about her body, her choice. And so that's the only question. And then the last one is about, oh gosh, my brain just totally shut off. It's anti-pro-life in that, you're not fully pro-life, so therefore you don't get to have any say about abortion. Like if you're pro-death penalty, or if you're pro-war, or if you're for anything else like that, then and then that gets carried even farther to, if you're not, personally adopting every child, then you don't get to have a say in this. If you're not willing to adopt every unwanted baby, and it's like, none of those arguments, that entire category is logically like just weak. And I'm trying not to be just, because it's only character based. Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean? That's like saying, I don't like your character, so you're saying that abortion is murder. You're only saying that because you think you have better morals than me, and it's like, no.
Yeah, exactly. It's a non sequitur, but it feels
like that way to me. But here's the thing: is that this is where I've been trying to, for like the past year, I have run out of empathy, and I'm finally getting it back, I think. As I'm normally like, especially with issues like this, when I see somebody saying something crazy, I wouldn't say I'm naturally, but I have learned to always be like, why would they think that? What makes them think that's normal? Yeah. And are they actually evil, or are they just, they think that's right? And that's what's so hard, because it's like people, every tenet that I bring to the table on the abortion discussion is absolute. Like everything I take for like absolute certainty is not taken for granted by the other side, quote unquote. Right. Like I bring, to me, people say, when does life begin? And this is just where my brain goes. I don't think it's very convincing for other people, but like, this is where my head goes is, okay, well, it's just a blastocyte of 16 cells at conception, after whatever, however much time, and I just go, who didn't go through that phase though? Right. Like, is there a single human that has ever been that did not be that? Right. And with every phase of life, I just keep asking that question. So has anybody lived today that was not in that phase? And what happens if you don't do anything? Right. In almost 100% of cases, if a baby is in the womb and it's this big and you don't do anything, what happens? Like, it's almost like, where do humans come from? It's a silly way to me, that's just where my brain goes. I'm like, it's because people treat the issue of conception like it's not important. Like I said, it doesn't matter. It's all about the woman. Look, I hate that phrasing of the question, because it's so, like, nobody wants to be anti-women's rights. Right, but it's not, like, and it's also you should be but it's more complicated. It just is. Exactly. And just like, I mean,
for somebody where they're like, but what about when somebody's raped? What about that? How does that disqualify the person from the right to live?
Yeah.
And like, that's not forcing somebody to, live with the reminder of their attacker and everything else. What was the, I think that was the whole point of, wasn't that there a movie with Charlize Theron, Monster? Wasn't that part of the, or maybe it wasn't Monster. There was some movie where literally like it was dealing with the unresolved trauma of a lady who is raising a son that is, the result of rape.
Wow.
And it's like, yeah, there's some traumatic reminders, but she also ultimately comes to the place of like, but this is a life and it's not this kid's fault. And like, this is their own human being. And like, again, the idea that like, okay, so if that kid is disqualified from life because of one person's bad decision, it was a horrendous, abusive decision on behalf of the sperm donor,
rapist,
the rapist. And so the mom had nothing to do with that. She's a victim. And now like, but so is the child. So is the child is a victim even more so because there's no autonomy. They don't have any choice in what's happening. And given the choice between death and life, wouldn't they choose life? And as it continues to go, it's like, man, well, if that abuse,
you're not paying attention, and you're a horrible person for even saying that because you're ignoring trauma, and it's
exactly.
Like, but that's where there's all this stuff that gets dragged into it.
Two wrongs don't make a right, and causing physical and emotional trauma to the mom by going through an abortion is not a healing or beneficial thing, no matter how much our society tries to celebrate it.
Right.
There's a reason why it's secretive, why there's not a lot of stuff about it. Why, I even heard somebody complaining about how, life choice, crisis pregnancy clinics, they were saying like, well, they use tools of deception like sonograms to trick people into not getting abortions. And I'm like, they show them a live heartbeat.
They show them the truth.
And oftentimes now a lot of them have 3D imaging. So they get a 3D picture of this
that's
visibly human fetus.
That's not comfortable if you're thinking about getting an abortion. That's not comfortable.
And it's not comfortable if you're the abortion provider. But when you're the life choice, when you're the person carrying that and you go, man, that looks way too much like a human being for me to just be like, let's salt it like the snail I don't want in my garden.
Yeah,
because that's what the abortion procedures are disgusting. I won't get into all the details. But
I don't want to.
They're brutal
the heebie-jeebies.
I
don't like it.
Nightmarish. It makes Saw look like a kids movie. It's disgusting and brutal. And it's traumatic on all sides. But like, if we're gonna go with the sins of the father being abusive, 100% agree.
Right.
A rapist is an abuser. Yeah. If the sins of the father being abusive disqualify the child from the right to life, then what about a toddler whose father beats his mother? Once we put the father in jail and free the mother from that, now she's got the obligation to this kid who's going to connect her to this scumbag criminal for the rest of her life. Oh, well, now we better, just execute the child because his life's going to be better because he wasn't really wanted and he's a burden on his mom and it's going to be hard on them. And she's got this past to deal with and she didn't have time for that.
Yeah,
or it's like Canada bragging about how they've almost eliminated Down syndrome in Canada. The way they've done that is through selective abortion by testing.
Yeah,
they test in the womb, and when they see a kid who's testing for Down's markers, they abort the child, and
that's disgusting.
That's horrible.
And
I had a friend whose older brother growing up was Down syndrome.
Yeah, me too.
He was a great kid.
To me, it's tricky because I had fears of that, like, I'm like, what if one of my kids, what if that's how they are? And I say fear because it is scary. Like I'm being honest. It's scary to think of because it's any special need that's that intense where you are basically caring for somebody their entire life. They never, and I was just like, I was wrestling with that because it was just, I can't imagine how scary that is. If you face that. And
well, there was a movie where it was Me Before You, I think is what it's called, and it's a whole thing about and it's gotten blasted a bunch for being very ableist and everything else. And some people elevated it. You know, it's like 50 Shades of Grey. It's like clearly abusive, manipulative, bad, horrible thought.
Right.
It's not romantic, but people still elevate it as such. Me Before You is the, it's kind of the teenage pixie dream girl sort of thing, where it's this completely unrealistic relationship and everything. This guy who's, I think, a quadriplegic falls in love with this girl. He's super rich, and they fall in love, and he knows, like, I'm never going to be able to do anything in my life. I'm stuck in this wheelchair. I'm like, I my life is kind of a waste, and it's only going to get worse. So if we get married and then I commit suicide or you euthanize me, then you get all of this stuff and you're free to just live your life and you're not dragged down by me. And that's the like elevated moral result of the film. And some people were blasting it. Half the people that had an issue with it were upset because the guy is actually not in a wheelchair. He's a capable adult who is, can walk and everything. And he's pretending.
Kind of like an actor.
Right. Yeah. He was just acting. How dare he? But
I never
how weird is
one.
it that that's the problem with the movie and not the fact that it's incredibly just unhealthy on all sides to say my life is not worth living and it's a waste on you just because I'm in this situation. And it's like, cool. So everybody in a wheelchair needs to consider that their life isn't worth living. And anybody who's suicidal, I saw another thing where a guy had like a right to life sticker on his car, and he got an angry letter left on his windshield where somebody, like in all caps with tons of exclamation points and angry emojis written on it and stuff, was like, oh, well, easy for you to say since you came from a healthy, like loving home. Obviously you had loving parents and everything else, not so easy to say for somebody who's not wanted. And he's like, hold on. Like, you only have the right to live if your parents want you.
Yeah.
You only like now our own desire affects attempted suicide is illegal. Yeah. Murder is illegal. And even euthanasia is oftentimes illegal or like super gray area at best.
Right.
And we don't have, regardless of all of the aftercare pieces related to abortion, we don't seem to have a consistent ethic of, man, life is really valuable. And that rather than going, all abortion should be hassle-free because of the 0.1% of the people, the abortions that happen in this country, because of the tiny fraction of a percent that involve medically necessary procedures where the mother or the baby's life is threatened, or cases of incest and abuse, where even in that, I think there's less of an argument for an abortion. Like somebody's life that's going to be hard, difficult, doesn't mean there isn't any value to it. Right. And I think pretending like hardship is unworthy of perseverance is a really dangerous road to keep walking down.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say earlier. I think I lost my train of thought, but
it's okay. I did too. We got back.
No, but I think it's just more like, I never want to sound callous, because again, I'm bringing these like what we're talking about like seems so obvious to us.
Yeah.
And it takes so much effort for someone to like get over their own lack of the same framework that most people who are pro-life have. Most people who are pro-life have a framework of shouldn't we err on the side of caution in case that's a life? Shouldn't we treat it like it is a person, because even though it's in a female body, it can't be. They're coming from, and when I say there, I just mean that argument is usually coming from a place of, that woman owes nothing to the child in her, because that child may not have been wanted in the first place. And that kind of somehow works backwards in time to take away the right of that person to live, that.
Well, and that goes then.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Hold on. Yeah. But I think it's just when you look at it through those lenses, it does make sense, everything they say. right? That argument makes sense if you're supposing that this is just a clump of cells and I don't want the inconvenience. I didn't mean to get pregnant. Therefore, I don't have to deal with the pregnancy. But that kind of goes back to, though I had to argue against this in a philosophy class. I think it's Judith Butler. I don't know if that's her name, but she was, I think it was
the
her
violinist
paper,
argument. Yeah.
The violinist thing. And I just said, having sex is like jumping out of a plane. Okay. There's a chance, even with a parachute, you will not make it safely to the ground, And so and in this case, falling to the ground would mean getting pregnant, which isn't the best analogy, but because I like babies a lot. They're awesome. But what I mean is there is an inherent risk because sex is a reproductive act and it never will not be a reproductive act.
Right.
So there's an interesting dynamic that people seem to, for me, I'm just like, again, if someone's going around and inseminating women through magic and they're getting pregnant with no act whatsoever, then
it's not like people are inseminating women on the black market.
Then we're having a whole different conversation, which would be rape. Like, I get it. And I'm just saying that's usually not what's happening. What's happening is two people are having consensual sex, and in the overwhelming, number of abortions, that is what's happening. Two consenting adults are having sex, and that is a result, regardless of the birth control you use, there's always a chance. And so there is always that to me is buy the ticket, take the ride. Nobody made you have sex.
Like, your body is made
if it's
for
rape,
this.
I'm not using, this argument doesn't apply to rape. I just think, I'm talking about the 99% or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The large percent of just a convenience abortion. And to me, it's nobody's involved in this decision making but you and your partner. And you guys made a mistake if you didn't want to get pregnant. But, there's literally no excuse. Did you not know that was an outcome? Did you not think that this could happen?
Well, even if they didn't, like when a child, a million different ways that things can go wrong, but ignorance of what could happen is not an excuse to just, be free of all consequence. And there's all sorts of, we have all sorts of laws about, the consequences, whether they were intended or whether you're even aware that could be a thing or whether you were even aware that was wrong. And there may be different penalties for those consequences. Like if you can prove insanity or mental, insufficient mental capacity to comprehend your actions, but it doesn't mean you just go back oh, okay, no harm, no foul, move on. No, there was a harm, there's a foul, there is something. And it may not be just hardcore prison, but there's still a penalty and there's still a consequence. I'm not saying that people who have gotten an abortion all need to be thrown in jail, but just that there's the consequence of when there is copulation, like you said, it's a reproductive act. And so it does bring about this, whether or not you want the result of that, even if you didn't know that that's how that happens, or if you didn't want it, again, to the rape thing, I still don't think that disqualifies the value of that life. And if it does, then how are you drawing the line up until, why are you giving an expiration date or a statute of limitations to that? Because every one of those ends up being fudged. Because
think of
when
it
you
this
say,
way.
Until they come out, they're fine. So it's purely an issue of location. It's
but
not
even then,
timing
the
or
child's
anything
dependent
else.
on someone else. That was always an interesting argument.
Right.
Well, until they're born, and I'm like, and then they're helpless. They will literally die if you leave them alone.
Right.
And you can feed them formula. I'm not saying they have to be cared for by the mother, but they will die. They are absolutely dependent for years on
on
caretaking.
You could make a case that a 6-year-old still isn't really capable of surviving.
I don't think
on
mine
its
could
own.
last long if the rapture happens and he doesn't make it. I mean, he's
No, I know Bella and Callie are 11 years old, and I'm not entirely sure they'd pull it off all that well if they had nobody around. Okay,
they'd be okay with the food that they know how to eat and make. And
but they have no way of earning money, and they can't
or
drive.
accessing the money that we have.
Exactly.
They've got they've each got like $30 in cash that like they have earned over the past year.
Yeah, and earned by like having a birthday.
Yeah, or mowing the lawn.
Yeah,
but and that's why it's an interesting thing, because what I hope is that it's like I have a hard time having a good faith conversation with people, because it's not again, you just get immediately caught up in the premises.
Yeah.
The premises are not shared. Like if I the only way, like, this is the only way I can try to make it make sense to somebody who disagrees with all of my premises. It's like, just imagine that, like, if you're playing a game of pool and there's a chance you give birth to an alien instantaneously at the end of the game. Like, would you play pool? And that alien needs you. You know what I mean? Like, there's no womb involved.
Right.
It's going to just pop out of existence.
Yeah.
Like, how often are you going to play pool? Like, it might be the most enjoyable game on planet Earth. It's so fun. Like,
Yeah.
So,
but you're going to be aware that this is a possibility.
Like, you have friends that have had the alien appear, like you have been there when the alien got there, and how, like, that's what we're talking about. It's this, you have to know that there is no way to avoid the chance of the alien appearing if you play the game. And that's kind of how, the only way I can approach the subject is like, so if we can agree that that's true, then now we can talk about, like, what, then you have to admit, I think, you can't say, okay, I accept that premise that if we have sex, there's a chance life could happen. Right. And then say, but it doesn't matter. Because I'm like, nobody exists that wasn't conceived in such a way. Even if it was in a test tube, that's still a sperm and an egg. It's not. So this is how it happens. There's no way to get it without doing this. And if you interrupt it, it doesn't happen. And if you stop it at any phase, it doesn't happen. Like, I couldn't kill my 6-year-old because I don't like 13-year-olds.
Right. Exactly.
Like,
and that's
he
the
will
other
become
point.
A 13-year-old.
The desire for that person, or the inconvenience of it. Where do you cut that off then?
Yeah.
And where do you get to make that call? Is it just child abandonment or anything? Because that's the thing, is like, it's actually a crime to have the baby and then just throw it in a dumpster.
Yeah.
And there are places to give it up.
Neglect.
Right.
Is
there
a crime,
are ways to give it up. There are places where you can make a, no questions asked adoption kind of.
I think most fire
thing.
Departments in California, even, it's like you can literally, like, and they're just like, what's this? And you go, it's your problem now.
Exactly. Like, and not that that's an ideal situation for anybody.
No,
but that not being an ideal situation does not negate the right to life there. I mean, like, by that same rationale, by going like, well, the foster care system sucks, so therefore, like, you can't subject a child to that. Okay, well, man, we should just hand out guns and let people go execute the homeless.
Right.
Because they're a blight on society, and I'm saying that with air quotes.
People.
I don't believe that.
Like, I'm overweight. I don't want to get shot, but I'm technically a burden, Like,
probably medically in the future, a burden on society. I just got my BMI as well, and I'm like, nah, it's never been accurate, so I refuse to accept what that says. It says that I'm like bordering on obese, and I'm like, bro, I'm not.
Nope, wrong. Well, dude, you've seen my middle son, Corbin. He looks like a freaking gymnast, and they're like, his BMI is really high. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. You're like,
who?
The kid is built like a fullback. Just get over it.
He's very, like, he looks like an athlete. He's got this athletic build.
Yeah,
but
that's what I mean.
He's not stocky. He doesn't look like he should weigh more than he does. He weighs like 45 pounds.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, for his age and his height. And I'm like, really though? I'm like, I heard a story like that Joe Rogan is considered obese. Yeah. And if you've ever seen that dude, like, doing a post-fight interview, he looks like a gorilla. Jacked. Yeah. Because he's just so heavy. Yeah. And, and it's like, that's, anyway, that was a good tangent. Yeah. But that was where, so Katie and I went back to that conversation. We did start to talk about, because she said, what about the vaccine mandates then? Because my body, my choice. Like, I don't want anybody to take anything out of my body or put anything in it against my will. Mm-hmm. And it's like, look, I think that's logically consistent, but people who hold that view tend to not care. They're like, oh, who cares? Because I put the vaccine in you for my good.
Yeah.
So you having the vaccine makes sense for me to mandate to you.
It is ironic that those land on opposite sides.
I brought up obesity because
Yeah.
I said that's measurable. Like obesity has a huge tax in America on our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And we all share that burden if you have healthcare because we all, that's where the money comes from. It's not magic. People who are healthy who pay for people who are sick.
Right.
And so that, or you being healthy your whole life, paying and then getting, you know what I mean?
Well,
so it's
and
like
don't
and that's dark. By the way, I want to clarify what I just said. I don't agree with.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying that that's an analogy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that if you're overweight, you're a blight on this planet.
No.
I'm saying that's the same logic
but it's
that's being used the other way.
But go back to the vaccine just for a second. And despite the injected into some, my body, my choice, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But consider the political hypocrisy, or the logical hypocrisy.
Yeah. Yeah.
People who are pro-choice tend liberal. People who are pro-life tend conservative. Mm-hmm. Reverse it now for my body, my choice. For the vaccine, conservative view. My body, how dare you not do this thing to yourself on my behalf? Liberal view. Well, how come you get to control what I do on this thing with the vaccine? And you can see the
inconsistency on both sides.
But you won't let anybody else tell you, even to the point of where I just saw somebody else who I deeply care about posted something, and main part of the argument was you don't get to say anything about an abortion if you don't have a womb.
Right.
And I was like, how does that make any sense? That's like saying I can only comment on the murder. As a white guy, I could only outlaw the murder of white males, but talking about how, the abuse of children, I'm not a child. So how could I claim that?
Yeah.
Well, that's stupid.
I know
the life
that
inside
never made
you,
sense to me.
The life inside you. Like I was one, like you said, I was one of those once. Like there's just so many points of inconsistency. And it's like, man, if we could just consider the fact that this is, in most cases, state-sponsored murder on a mass scale that is just horrifying. And so if we can back it up and quit trying to find loopholes to deny that it's life, and let's talk about all of the other things we could do to help prevent. The one thing I will say that is also a logical inconsistency in a way, and it's definitely an oxymoron, is provably abortions are way down under liberal presidential administrations.
Right.
The more liberal control in our national government, the fewer abortions there are in our country. That's happened every single time. They go up under conservative presidents and conservative administrations. I don't know. Part of it is because
I can't think of a single reason.
Yeah, part of it, people speculate, I think, is the by making it less of a taboo, ultimately it's in the same vein as the drug argument. If we back off on the war on drugs and decriminalize most drugs, then we get to a place where, as we're dealing with it, we actually have less drug problems because there's everything else that goes along with that we're able to really deal with the issue on a better level when we're not so focused on demonizing and criminalizing everybody who uses them. And I think in the same way, I think that leads to part of that outworking, is that when you have an administration and a generalized set of policies that are pro-choice, all of the other things that come with their side of the argument of figuring out ways to deal with this, everything goes down weirdly. And that doesn't totally make sense, but for some reason that's happening, as opposed to,
it's not intuitive.
The reason why, that movie or that show you were talking about that deals with abortion in England in the 60s and that kind of thing, where you're, when it's this huge stigma, it's the people who seem like they should more than anyone else be against it seem to push it farther, or seem to, even when it was fully illegal, it was the people who were claiming against it who were the ones rushing their children off to some convent, she went to, we sent her to boot camp, or we sent her to military school for a while or finishing school. And it was really like living in a nunnery, a convent until they could have the baby. And then they, send off the baby somewhere and bring the girl back and pretend like nothing ever happened, or they perform an abortion and bring her back and pretend like nothing ever happened. And a lot of people experienced that kind of absolute shame and shunning over the unwed pregnancy that led to these, kind of nuclear options for how to deal with it. And like, man, if we can both remove the stigmas around unwed pregnancy and instead deal with, that's not the ideal situation for anyone. It just isn't. The absolute ideal, whether anybody grew up in that or whether it's even that realistic in whatever scenario, you can't deny that the ideal is a healthy father and mother in a loving family. That's hard to find. That's really hard to find. It's hard to be part of, but that is still the ideal. It is less than ideal to have anything other than that. And so the more we can
the data bears that out pretty consistently.
Right. And so the more we can get rid of.
But it's unpopular to say that. I mean, and that's I think, like going back to something you said, like you can't comment on this unless you have a womb, or even what you just said about what is an ideal condition for a human being to grow and thrive in. And it's not like these are, I mean, in the case of not being able to comment on something unless you yada, 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 I mean, that only weakens the people saying that, because they're missing out on brain power from lots and lots of folks that might have the answer. And, I was thinking about this the other day, like, how many people do we need to come up with the, Pythagorean theorem, right? Like only one guy needs to come up with it. But until you get it, you probably should have had the whole world working on it. You know what I mean? Because that's a real important bit of math, right? And so only one, so that's there's this weird thing. I mean, I made a joke to a liberal member of our family that I won't mention, but one time he said something along the lines of, something about abortion and blah blah blah, and I just kind of joked, like, I mean, think of all the wonderful, like, Democrat votes that are being lost, and I meant that flippantly, but which isn't a fun thing to joke about looking back on it. And when I said it, and now it sounded bad, but whatever, I said it.
I get the humor in it. That's why I laughed, but also yes, it was crass.
Yeah, but also that's gross. Yeah. But yeah, I think that whole situation, it's just this is the only thing that makes me nervous these days, is just there seems to be this sentiment that our morals are more important than anything, including reality, that says otherwise. And so if reality tells us that a child should have a stable home with a mom and a dad, and that data is correlated so strongly that it's overwhelmingly true, that doesn't matter, because we know there's got to be one kid who was raised in a horrible family that did okay. And so that means it's not a prescription. And there are plenty of messed up kids who came from a quote unquote good home. And it's like, yes, but that's okay. So you would like to roll the dice with that life then, that's what you're saying. And that's, our society is hell bent on just putting forward an ideal and supporting it with propositions instead of living by a truth and letting more truth prop up the truth.
Yeah.
And so what happens is like Twitter, this seems like a good simulacrum, because it's literally, once you look in the weeds, maybe, who knows? I'm just saying, if it's true that they were faking a bunch of stuff and bot accounts are a lot bigger than they said, if that's true, then they've been lying and their shares aren't worth anything, and the whole thing's a hoax. And how many other social medias are like that, and all it takes is one eccentric billionaire to offer to buy them to find out, well, there's nothing underneath here. Yeah. It's all a joke.
Well, and I mean, so on Facebook's level, the top 10 most popular Christian accounts on Facebook, like organizational
all of them
accounts,
are Russian.
They were all Russian bot and troll accounts. So, I heard
that statistic too, and it's terrifying. But again, that's where I just think I seriously have never met. I've met like one person that I would consider completely irrationally one way or the other, and like one person on the right I've met that I'm like, I don't know if you're a real person. You just keep saying the talking points, and then I've met one like couple on the left that was so cartoonishly liberal that I was like, are you real? There's no way you believe all that stuff, you know?
Right. All right, on this episode, we've got an interview with, and I didn't even tell Scott this. I got to talk with this girl Chané. She's a TikTok creator from South Africa, and so that was a lot of fun to talk about what's rad about Jesus in her life on literally like the complete opposite end of the globe. Like she's
about as far as you can get from us.
Yeah, exactly. We're on the west coast of the U.S. She's in South Africa, which is the far other end of the southern hemisphere, and in the other hemisphere. So just pretty cool thing. But something I didn't think about: English is not her first language.
What does she speak?
Afrikaans, and
really?
Which is like a weird version of like it's like Dutch and like mixed in with like some African tribal influence. And so it as you hear the interview, she's struggling for words to say sometimes because she's like, I don't know the English words for this, and I'm trying to think of how to say it. And so it was a lot of fun. But she's a 19-year-old kid in university down there, but she loves Jesus and got to hear her testimony and everything. So it was a lot of fun. Stick around and check out the podcast with Chané, who's a really cool TikTok creator, and we've got the links in the podcast thing. So follow her if you if you're on TikTok. Thanks for listening to the Be Rad for Jesus podcast. I am here today with Chané Fourie, who is a Christian content creator on TikTok, hailing all the way from South Africa, and just one of my absolute favorite creators. I've gotten to the point where, honestly, I nearly always, when I see your content come up, I kind of almost double tap it before I even really watch it, and then I like go ahead and watch it anyway, and make sure. But man, I appreciate the humor and just the sincerity and the fun and the joy you bring to the platform. Chané, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, so like you said, I'm from South Africa. I'm 19 years old, and I'm in my first year of university. And if you're interested in what I'm studying for my Bachelor's of Education in Intermediate Phase Teaching. So that's like middle school in America. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And you're in your first year of university. So how many, another 3-4 years ahead of you on that?
Yeah. I think 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
All right. And we were just talking about how a couple of minutes ago as we were getting on the call, how you were saying that because you're in South Africa, English is not your first language, right?
No,
and so would you
not.
give us a brief, just a greeting, say, hey, how's it going? Or, thanks for listening or whatever, something like that in Afrikaans?
Of course, I will. Okay, hallo almal, ek is Chané, ek is van Suid-Afrika. Baie welkom by hierdie podcast. Ek hoop julle geniet dit en ja.
That's awesome. I love it. I speak a little bit of Spanish, and I probably couldn't actually pull off that greeting in Spanish. So there we go. But so that's very cool, and that for those out there listening may explain the accent a little bit that you'll hear, which I think is super cool. I also find it one of the hardest to pretend to copy, because I know anytime I've tried to do a South African accent, just messing around or whatever, I always end up sounding more just like a really bad Australian accent or something. It's that like I might get one or two words and then immediately fall back out of it. And I've read and heard that I think it was Leonardo DiCaprio did a South African accent for I think the movie was Blood Diamond a long time ago. But I remember hearing they made a big deal about the accent because, and I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it was supposed to be pretty authentic. Like people were like, "Wow, he really nailed that," and that never happens. Nobody ever gets it right. So that was kind of a big deal for an American actor to nail the accent for once, because apparently y'all have a pretty complicated accent.
Yeah, we do actually. Like a lot of people think it's somewhere between British and Australian. And also, I think it depends on in what part of South Africa you are. Like some people have like, we call it the Joburg Boot accent. Yeah, so it's, I don't really know how to describe it. It's very different.
Yeah, it is. But, actually hearing you speak Afrikaans kind of explains, like you can hear the connection, like, oh, okay, yeah, if that's your native tongue, I see how the English sound, the English version of that sounds like this. So very, very cool. So Chané, being in South Africa, different context from where I'm at on the west coast of the United States. And so, but the similarity we have other than TikTok is knowing Jesus. And so I would love to hear, but also for our podcast listeners to hear, how did you come to know Jesus in your life?
Oh, this is a story with, it's a complicated story. It has a lot of points, but I'll start from the beginning. So I was raised in a Christian household. We went to church a lot when I was younger. So I was born into a Christian community, and I looking back, I can really see God's hand in my life. Throughout everything that I've been through and stuff. But my relationship with Jesus started when I was 16 years old. So, and like the beginning of the hard lockdown we had when COVID just started. So, yeah. Can I elaborate on how
Please,
it happened?
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, I would love to hear, and I'm sure anybody else listening, tell us, like, because some things got to happen to move, even being raised in a Christian household, right?
Yeah,
some things got to
definitely.
happen where, what is that thing that, like, as a youth pastor, I'd always tell students, like, share, like, where was I? What did Jesus do that things are totally different on this side of knowing him? And so, tell us more about that, please.
Okay, thank you. So the thing is, I was 16 years old, so it was grade 10. In that time, my grandma's brother was a very huge part in my. He was like a very big part of my childhood, and I think he got cancer in his mouth, and it was just a very low point in my life, and that and a bunch of other things kind of it made me go a little bit closer to God. And when the hard lockdown came and COVID started and everything, it was just like, sorry, it's my Afrikaans brain now again. I'm
That's
like
okay.
already a few sentences in front, and I'm translating it to English. So let me just collect
that's
my
all good.
thoughts. Okay,
We will
thank you.
totally forgive you if every once in a while you slip out. If you start speaking in not English, I'll go, wait, what? It'll be fine. It's all good.
Okay, thank you. So
Sure.
So, I have to say, when I was 16, I was kind of into it, but not like with my whole heart. So I always read my Bible and stuff, but like I was sticking to Psalms and Proverbs. So I wasn't going like the New Testament or Old Testament or anything, which was kind of more like a habit instead of reading the Bible to actually get to know God. So, back to when COVID started. So everything was shut down. So it was basically just the four walls of our house, and I was with my family and everything, and I just felt this emptiness. And because I was raised in a Christian household, I kind of had this whole idea that I was raised into Christianity. So it's kind of like dumb luck, I would say, that
Sure.
that I am a Christian. So I started researching, and we have all of these different worldviews and religions and stuff, and so I narrowed it down to Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, of course. And I kind of looked into each of them individually, and after a lot of stuff that I saw on YouTube, and I actually watched a lot of Ravi Zacharias's some of his what do you call it? Cannot think of the word right now.
Are you talking about his apologetics videos?
Yes, those.
Okay, yeah.
I watched a lot of those, and it really so I had the whole thing about Christianity being true. So then I just started working on my relationship with God, because a relationship with Him is very important. So that's kind of how it all came to be.
Awesome. So if I'm understanding all of that correctly, so being raised in a Christian household, finding that place where, man, I'm really kind of taking this for granted, or it's dumb luck, or it's just because I was raised this way. And so I really want to look into, you took the time to really explore your faith and checked in with other faiths, and kind of the more you looked into things, researched it, found some apologetics videos online and that type of thing. And as you listened to reasoning for the faith, as you explored that, and it sounds like maybe even because of what was going on with, and I'm sorry, was that your grandmother's brother?
Yeah.
And so because of the sickness, and then and all of that with cancer, finding a low place and looking for hope, and like, is there anything real in this? And then to be able to find, oh yeah, this is legit. This faith really is the one I really do know of and have heard of, and can trust that it's not just dumb luck. It's not just, oh, I happen to be raised in this, but we actually know the truth, and we know the one true and living God. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I got that.
Yeah.
Excellent. No, that's amazing. I was raised going to church once in a while, like Christmas and Easter and that kind of thing. And so to land in a place of, by the time I had met Jesus, I was such a skeptic that I would make fun of Christians. I would find people that did like campus ministry at my college, and I would mock them and argue with them and make try to shame them. And then to find, have an experience with God that I couldn't explain, and then go, okay, hang on. I think I believe this Jesus guy, but I have all these arguments and ideas against why none of that's true. And then to look into it, and every single one of those ideas and arguments against God didn't hold up. The more I studied it, my defenses just kept falling apart. And I just went, okay, well, I know I've met God. I know him, and I know him. I've experienced him. And so I have this real moment in my life that I can't deny. And I have this knowledge that this is true, and it works in every category of life. The more I look into it, the more real, the more correct this shows itself to be. And so I love hearing that you journeyed through that, to kind of starting there and then go, wait, I better check, and then coming back around. That's so cool. So are you involved in your church at all now? Do you serve in any way, or volunteer at all?
Well, I'm a huge coffee lover, so I'm helping at the church's coffee table. I think once every month. So yeah, I actually, it's kind of a long story. So I moved to my aunt and uncle in Potchefstroom, where I currently live, and I used to live near Cape Town in George. I don't know if So
I've heard of Cape Town.
Yeah. So I used to live there. So it's basically in December of 2020 when I moved to Potchefstroom. So I started attending our current church in March of 2021, and it's actually a very amazing story. Our neighbors, it's two sisters, and I love them both so much. And they introduced us to this church, and yeah, we just immediately fell in love with the church, and yeah, I was baptized there too. So cool.
That's awesome. Baptisms are the best. They, baptism and salvation, because they're tied so closely together. We're getting ready to plan a baptism right now. We had a young man who's a middle school age. He's right around 11 or 12, and he has been raised in church, but found a moment where in church this week he was like, I get it though. Like, I know about God and I know about Jesus, but I get it, and I want to say, and I don't know what to do, but I'm ready. Like, I believe Jesus is my Savior, and I want to tell the world I want to do that. I want to serve. I want to get connected, and so
wow, that's
we're
amazing.
getting him plugged in. Yeah, he's going to start running slides in our church service and everything. And my daughter, who's 11, kind of talked with him about that a little bit, and he kind of gave her some credit of like, she made it okay to figure this out and to kind of ask the question that got to, all right, I'm ready for this, and so that's such a cool thing. And also, as an avid coffee lover, some might say coffee addict, God bless your ministry. The coffee ministry is one of my personal favorites, and so it's a really important ministry to me because I need it all the time.
Yes, same.
Yeah. So, how do you take your coffee? Let's just briefly.
Quite strong, actually. Yeah, so.
Do you drink it black, or do you put a lot of stuff in it?
No, I actually put a lot of stuff in it. So yeah, I tried black coffee once, and it's not for me. So yeah, but I have to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, mine's. I'm drinking black coffee right now, and it just. I got in the habit. Over the years, I've served in and been connected to so many different churches, and sometimes the coffee's really, really bad, and then I'll put a little creamer or something in there, especially if their water's bad. It makes everything taste funny. And so, but if I can get away with it, I always go for the black coffee. That was one of the places where, especially trying to just be a little bit health conscious. Like, I don't pay that much attention, but that was an easy place to cut out a lot of sugar unnecessarily. It was like, all right, I don't need an entire frappuccino. I can just have coffee.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So, Chané, I would love to hear about. So, you're in university. You have been around, at least it sounds like, some exposure to other worldviews, other religions, and things, and even just, I think, globally, secularism, like not being connected to a faith, is a growing worldview that people have, where they're just not into Jesus at all, or it's kind of in name only. And so one of the places I think as Christians where it really stands out for us is in, recognizing where following this, like Jesus says, follow the straight and narrow path, and so as we do that, there are times where it's real obvious where the wide road that's easy and leads to destruction, it's real obvious that we're not on that path. For you in your life, where do you notice that separation the most? What is the most radically different thing in your life from those around you in the way you follow Jesus?
Well, it's a lot of things, actually. It's when I gave my heart to Jesus, a lot of things changed. The way I view music and certain movies, and the people I surround myself with. A lot of those things actually have a huge impact, I'll say, because with a lot of the secular music that we listen to, it's some of it is actually very blasphemous, and it kind of supports ideas and lifestyles that we as Christians shouldn't be following. So I get funny looks every now and then when I tell someone I don't really listen to secular music, or I'm very selective with what I'm listening to. So Yeah.
So what do you have any favorite Christian artists that you listen to? What's your kind of music connection there, or favorite? What's number one on your playlist right now?
Number one. That's a very good question. Yeah, on Spotify, I actually have, yeah, it's a whole playlist. I listen to a lot of, okay, but this is going to sound a little bit controversial. I know the whole thing going on with Hillsong and everything at the moment, but a lot of
Hey,
their
the
songs,
music slaps. So
it does, yeah. And yeah, so Hillsong is definitely one of my top favorites. And Elevation Worship. We have, yeah, All Sons and Daughters, I hope. Yeah.
they're great.
They are. Especially that one song, what's the name of it? It's something with, it's your breath in our lungs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Great Are You Lord, I think is the name of
Yeah.
that song.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I love that song. It because yeah, there was a whole period where it was really, really kind of a big thing that you're seeing it in a lot of places quite a few years ago, where there was a big emphasis on the idea of, it just seemed like a lot of different teachings, a lot of, going to camp with students and hearing speakers or watching people online and that kind of thing, hearing songs, even not just songs, but preaching and all of that. People were emphasizing that, hey, the fact that we have breath in our lungs, like the from the moment of creation of man, the breath in us, everything else was formed out of the dirt. We're just carbon, right? But then here's God putting his spirit, his breath into us, the Hebrew's ruach, and putting that into us and that bringing us to life. And that piece of like, man, what am I going to do with this thing that God has given me, right? And so I love that song for that. What seems like not a very, on the surface, like it's like, oh, okay, yeah, there's breath in our lungs, so I'll pour out praise. But like, it's your breath in our lungs.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna use that and pour that back out in glory and praise to you. It's a beautiful, beautiful concept. And I love how it, if you really process it, it goes pretty deep. So,
Yeah.
but it also just, it's a good song.
It is, yes.
Awesome. Yeah. And despite all of the everything, the controversy and everything else, and even I know some people who have validly questioned whether we should even be, listening to or supporting or playing in church like elevation songs and stuff too, because they have issues with the teaching or practices of the church and that kind of thing. And that's a whole huge debate. But, wherever all of that lands, the controversies of the leadership structure and everything else. I know some people who are connected to Hillsong music, not any of the famous people, but I've had, friends go through the Hillsong music school and everything, and their hearts are so genuine. They're not writing any of that out of some like nefarious, come believe all of our stuff, buy all of our things, support our, craziness. They really love Jesus. And they're putting everything they have into that. And I think that is evident in why those songs are so attractional, why they're so good, why they're so easy to bring into corporate worship, because people love to worship God with these words that these people have been gifted and brought to us in these melodies. So
Yeah, and I think also with Hillsong and I have to admit some of Bethel's songs are actually also very good, but I think especially Bethel and Hillsong, for some reason, when you mention Bethel or Hillsong to some Christians, they immediately are kind of, So, I think in Afrikaans we have this saying that soos een vrot appel sal die res aansteek. And what it translates to is, kind of one bad thing corrupts everything else. And I think that's kind of the view they have with Hillsong and Bethel, which I think is kind of, we're labeling all of them over some people's mistakes. So,
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's that was something that I was actually talking with a friend who's a worship leader at another church, and so in town here. And so my wife and I planted a church a little over a year ago, and I lead worship a lot of the time as well, and then trade off preaching with her. And I was talking with a friend who their church has made the decision to no longer play Hillsong, Bethel, Elevation, any of those churches where they're like, we don't support the theology, or especially, the scandals and things we don't want to be part of. And so we don't want to turn people to that church through exploring the song and going like, where did that song come from? I want to know more of, from these people who wrote that song and blah, blah, blah. And I get that on one hand, and it's still something we're kind of wrestling through. And so I understand I don't want to support somebody whose theology is wretched or be part of this thing with somebody who, is abusing leadership or abusing, protecting abusers or anything like that. But at the same time, we're willing to turn around and say, hey, the Psalms are good. And I think they're inspired scripture. That I don't have an issue with the Psalms. But would we cancel King David and say anything from him is tainted because, of the affair with Bathsheba and then having his friend murdered? I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with some leadership in churches around the world right now. I don't know that any of them have bodies buried in the yard, maybe they do. But biblically, that was Paul's whole thing. People weren't accepting him at first because he's converted, and they're like, I don't buy it. You're the terrorist who's trying to kill everybody. We're not going to follow you, and we're not letting you in here. And so I think there's sometimes a recognition, not that it excuses any other behavior or that the people who do the wrong things shouldn't be held accountable, but I think that doesn't mean that song might not have been inspired. And I think it's still possible that God has used people in incredibly flawed churches and incredibly flawed people to write beautiful music that is powerful and beneficial for the church as a whole. And so I don't know. It's always a tough thing, but then I think how often am I really thinking about who wrote the song as I'm using these words to praise God?
Yeah.
No,
that's
I'm not thinking about the author. I'm just thinking, man, these words, like your breath in our lungs. I forget that all sons and daughters wrote that. I mean, I know it if I think about it, but most of the time I'm just thinking this is a beautiful song, and it hits. It's one of those that I've had some deep, incredible connection with God in singing that song, and it wasn't because of their theology or not because of it.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah. So, okay. So that does lead us to a little bit though. This is a really rough segue to connect to the next question, but for some people, it's not. It's not the controversies and everything else that they don't like about Hillsong. For some people, it's strictly a theology thing, or especially like elevation and that kind of thing. And I think it's ironic because some people will, right now, while all the scandals are blowing up, on TikTok and YouTube and everywhere, all the commentators, they're all quick to bash Hillsong for their failures. And see, I told you their theology's bad and look at all this stuff. But they're real quick to excuse, the more reformed or the more kind of conservative theologians when they screw up. And there's all this controversy around like John MacArthur and a bunch of other people too. And so nobody's perfect. There's going to be scandal and issue and process and mistakes anywhere. But there's been a lot of, especially on my on my channel lately. I don't know why this keeps popping up, but I've noticed that a lot of people posting arguments about the Holy Spirit and about the Spirit moving and speaking to people and all of that. And And I'm torn sometimes when I see it, because when you read scripture, you read of a God who's living and active and does all these things, and these very crazy at times expressions of the Holy Spirit moving through people. And then you also see people horribly abuse that and claim all sorts of weird nonsense because of it. Somewhere in the middle, we really do serve, if the God who created the universe is truly the God we serve, if the God of all those miracles we read about is truly the God we know, and if the Bible says the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead and empowered him to do all the things he did, if that Spirit lives in us, if the Holy Spirit truly does dwell in us, shouldn't there be some radical evidence in our lives, some moments of something incredible happening where it's like, man, this is maybe even supernatural because I've met the God who created the universe. That should be an incredible moment. There's potential there for such incredible things. So whatever it is in your life, that was a very long intro to this question. But, I'd love to hear, what is the most radically awesome thing that has happened in your life, whether that's one moment of something, miraculous or whatever, or it's just, man, in this transformation in me, or in watching this process happen, this has been the most amazing and awesome, wonderful thing I've ever experienced or seen in following Jesus.
Well, my answer is kind of going to be a bit jumpy because there's so much,
Sure.
so much to cover, and so many things that God has done in my life. And like I said earlier, when I look back, and although I've only lived 19 years, I can really see God's hand moving in my life throughout my childhood and now. And so the first thing that comes to mind is when I was, I think, 4 or 5 years old, something happened in my family and everyone just split apart. So my grandma and grandpa got a divorce, and my mom and dad split up and everything. And so my grandma moved away, and my mom wanted to follow her and move with my sister and I because we were in her custody. So what then happened is my grandma moved, and my mom went to live with a friend for a while. And the thing is about my mom's friend is she was always extremely nice to my sister and I, especially to me in front of my mother. But as soon as my mom left the room, her whole demeanor changed towards us. So when my mom met my stepdad, no, it's fine. When my mom met my stepdad, it's kind of a whole thing, but that's like another story. So when my mom met my stepdad, we lived with this friend now because my mom wanted to move. And my mom went to meet him at night. So they had a date that night. So we stayed with the friend, and her children were still in school, but we were taken out of school because we were moving. So we were playing, and I remember she came and she told us we needed to start packing things away because it was almost bedtime because they had school tomorrow, the next day. And they kept playing, and so did I, because I'm 5. So
Sure.
So what then happened is she came into the room and she was extremely, rude to me. And so not that I'm petty, but it broke my heart. So my sister consoled me, and later that night my mom my mom didn't come home till late. So because of everything that happened, I kind of ran away from their house. So what then happened the whole night, which is where the miracle comes in, while I was walking, it was extremely quiet, and I remember it very vividly. And again, I'm a child, yeah, it's like almost still a toddler. So
Yeah.
I'm walking, and right in front of a church, the first car that night came, and I ran in front of a church, and it had trees in front of it, and I kind of hid behind the trees so they couldn't see me. And the miraculous thing is, their car stopped, and yeah, they told me I should come out to them, and I did. I went to them, and they asked me where I was going, and I said, no, I'm going to my dad's house. And they said, oh, where does he live? And I kind of showed them where he lived. So they took me, and I asked them, okay, so yeah, they told me that they were just going in that direction, which was kind of, looking back at it, it was extremely dangerous situation. And secondly, yeah, kind of considering that they came from like the yeah, I can't get the English word in my mind right now.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, so they took me to my dad's
for.
house. Awesome. So they took me to my dad's house, and I asked them, okay, so where's your house? And they showed me the house on the left. And I got to my dad's house, and yeah, so the next morning I woke up. There were police officers. I didn't know it was that kind of serious, but like, yeah, so later it was a whole thing. But my mom's friend asked me to show the house because they wanted to thank the two persons for taking me to my dad's house. And when we got to the house, they weren't there. So they said they never even they don't have the type of car that those two people drove that night. And it was like a middle-aged man with a lot of children, which he didn't look like the guy who helped me that night. And till this day, I'm actually looking back at it. It was a very dangerous situation, but it's kind of miraculous in a lot of ways, because I'm convinced God sent angels that night.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's just a bunch of things that they said didn't make sense, looking back at it, and the whole living situation and stuff. So yeah, and also another story is also when my grandma had cancer.
Okay.
15 or 16 years ago. She's in remission now for 16 years. And the amazing thing is, it was kind of getting into, hope was getting lost at that stage. And the doctor said it was quite serious. And they said that it was kind of spreading to her liver and her kidneys. And so it was really serious, getting serious. It was also people who, I think they were, they did evangelism, I think. But they went to hospitals and stuff, and they prayed to people. And so these people prayed to my grandma, and my grandma said it was a very strange experience, because it felt like her whole body went warm, and suddenly when they prayed over her now. So so the next, I think it was a Tuesday, my grandma went for scans and stuff, and the doctors were amazed because the cancer wasn't spreading anymore. So that's amazing. There's a lot of things in my life that God really came through.
Oh, that's incredible. We are I have a friend who's going through a lot of that right now. We're praying and expecting and waiting on a miracle like that. And I've seen incredible things, and I've even just this week I've experienced a little bit of healing in prayer. I fell pretty hard the other day and bruised a rib, And I mean, it hurts to breathe and move and everything with that. It's amazing how much affects and connects to your ribs. Like breath, and even anyway, I went to pray for another family, and while we were waiting for the dad to come back, his mother-in-law, because his family was at his mother-in-law's house, and his mother-in-law came and prayed for me while we're waiting to pray and anoint their kids and their family, because they'd been struggling with just sick all the time.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, and so she lays hands on my back and just starts praying, and man, like, Tylenol hasn't worked, ibuprofen hasn't worked. Like, I've been trying, like, not heavy narcotics, but like any household painkillers that I have, nothing's helping. Like, I've been in such pain, like I could barely move, I can barely catch my breath, and all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, there's still a little pain there, but it's like exponentially better. And I can't even, I'm like, nothing I've done has worked. No amount of drugs I've taken, try to take the pain away or anything else. No sitting in the right spot or anything. And I was sitting in a really uncomfortable position when she started praying too. I was like, I don't know how long I could sit like this. Like, I can't breathe like this. And then she started praying, and everything got really warm. And right around the rib, all the way around, like her hand was on my back, but all the way around to the front, all got really warm. And then the pain just faded. And so it's like a little sore now, but it's not like it was. And even like last night, it started hurting pretty bad again. And then my kids did the same thing, and they came over and they laid hands on and they prayed for me, and the pain went away again. And I'm like, dude, I need like prayer every couple hours instead of Tylenol every couple hours. This is way better.
Wow, that's amazing.
But I mean, should we expect any less? If the God we know is really the God who created everything, is it that big a deal to be like, I don't know, he healed me? Like, well, yeah, something should happen, right? Like,
yeah.
If God is that incredible and in our lives at all, incredible things should happen. So yeah, those are both amazing. Healing from cancer. Come on now, and you said she's in remission now for how many years?
15 or 16.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 2006. Yes, 16 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Praise God. What
Amen.
a cool thing. So, all right. So part of the fun, part of the excitement about Jesus that doesn't even come close to miraculous things like healing and true encounter. I think that the best thing about knowing and following God is not something flashy, right? It's lives being transformed, but that doesn't mean we can't have fun and have a good time. And so coming back around to, as I had kind of shared in the introduction, I know of you and who you are because of TikTok, and you make a lot of fun content, a lot of meaningful and deep things too, but often it's through different jokes and things. And so I'm curious for you, what has been, out of all the things that you have made, your own videos, what do you feel like was the funniest or like best? You're like, man, I did that and it cracks me up, even if that's the one that didn't get any views or anything. Like, what? Tell us a little bit about that video.
Oh, I know of one video. Okay, so it's the story of Paul preaching, and the guy fell from the window and he died. Yeah, and
Right.
He was resurrected, and so I did a whole skit where I played dead and everything. And to me, it's kind of this skit is just I don't know how to explain it, but yeah.
No, that I've seen. I think I've seen that one, but I love that you take a lot of audio that's not necessarily connected to that and that kind of thing. You've managed to hit a really good niche of the one of the strengths of TikTok that, Instagram's trying to copy now, and even YouTube is trying to do that with Reels or with their shorts. But taking audio from something random and then acting that out in a way, making new content with it. And you take some of the most random things, like I think, whether it's like Disney clip or whatever else, and turn that into some Bible connection or some Christian thing, or even just a joke about apologetics and all of that. So what would you say was your weirdest, like, let me ask it this way. Have you ever had a time where you grabbed like some audio, or you were working on a skit and you were like, I don't know, this one's kind of out there. I don't know if this is going to work.
Well, I think with most of my videos, it's kind of very hard to connect the audio with what I'm trying to tell through a skit. Yeah. So with a lot of them, actually, it's kind of always like will people get it? My grandma always jokes that I so I am so sorry.
No, it's okay.
So sometimes my grandma says my humor is a bit because she's on TikTok as well. So
cool.
She says my she doesn't get my humor. So then I'm usually like, okay, I really hope someone who watched this will get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I also once made a joke about the story of Judges and what's her name? Jael, I believe.
Oh yeah, with the tent peg.
Yeah. So I made that joke, and sometimes, people kind of. It also rubs some people the wrong way, which is kind of also funny because they don't get it that it's just a joke. Yeah. So I don't know if you've experienced that, but some people.
I think you were asking there when we hit that glitch. I think you were asking or had kind of mentioned, like, I think I heard you say, I don't know how much you've seen on your end, but people not getting it or having like a weird, like, that's not what I thought. I just hit one of those recently. And speaking about, the Holy Spirit and God moving in our lives and questioning that. And I actually, there's a guy who also follows me on Instagram. And so he messaged me on Instagram to talk about the video from TikTok that I had posted. And then I misunderstood his comments, and I was like, I don't think you get what I'm saying. It's that I like over explained it. He's like, no, yeah, I totally got that. And I agree 100%. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it reminded me of there's a commercial, I think it's for Discover Card. I don't know if they do if these commercials play over there, but for Discover credit cards, they had some commercials running for a while where they had people that I don't think they were actually twins, but they like looked pretty similar, and they would always have like these weird connections that, like where they're saying the wrong thing. And there was one where the guy who's calling in and the guy who, he's calling a customer to follow up, right? And the customer is holding a frog, and he calls up and he's like, hey, so, we cover everything. All this stuff works out really well. Like, the Discover, you get all the money back and everything. We just wanted to check in. And he's like, yeah. So I could even use this to pay for my frog insurance. And he's like, yeah, fraud insurance and fraud. And he's like, yeah, frog. He's like, yeah, fraud. And they keep going back and forth. It's like two guys that look the same, saying the same thing. And then they go, we're saying the same thing. Yeah, we're saying the same thing. And they're totally not. And I felt like that, but like that's my reference for like frog insurance, right? Yeah, okay. Because that's what it feels like. Is like, this is not. I don't think that we're actually saying the same thing. Although then the guy explained his point. He's like, yes, that right there, I get it, and that's what I was like. Oh, okay, you do. I swear you were not saying that before, or maybe I wasn't. So I get that a lot, especially since I'm not as funny on like writing skits and things. Like I always see those things and I'm like, that's a good idea, but you already did that, or whoever, so I can't do that one again. I got to come up with my own. I got no ideas. If I'm funny, I'm just naturally like, that wasn't smart to say, and then it's like mildly amusing. That's about all I got. So I'm not as good on that piece. So I post a lot more, like teaching or commentary kind of content, and I get misunderstood and or just randomly attacked a lot. What would you say? Do you have an example that stands out of like, this is the craziest time that I've been completely misunderstood?
Let me just quickly think. Yeah, I actually I went to visit my parents and I made a video about in South Africa we have this thing where a lot of churches are kind of obsessed about speaking in tongues, and like the Bible says, it's a spiritual gift, and I don't think everyone receives that gift. And
right.
So once I made a video about that, and some people were actually a bit rude, now that I think about it. So it's just sometimes I just think sometimes when I'm making a video, I'm doing it with good intentions, and like I said, it just rubs some people up the wrong way. So
and it's funny because on the one hand, I want to post things that are just encouraging and helpful. Those get like 0 views. I'll like look at it, a couple days later or even a week later, and it still has like maybe 200 views. And then I'll post something that I didn't even think was going to be that big a hot take, but a bunch of people got offended over it. And so then they're commenting, and there's all the rage commenting, and everybody says horrible things. And, I'm like blocking people from my channel and stuff because they're so mean and so uncalled for rude. And I'm like, how are you debating my theology, claiming that I don't really know Jesus, while also saying some of the most horrendous things that have ever been said to me? And like, it seems like you claim to know Jesus, but you are not acting like it, sir. Or I get tagged in weird videos, where people are responding and just hateful, but like hateful for Jesus. I don't get it. But those are the ones then. And like the one I mentioned about like the Holy Spirit talking about prophecy and just like, is it possible to hear from God today? And the people got so mad. And I'm like, dude, I don't like stirring the pot like that, but it's also TikTok's like, yeah, more people see this. And those are always the ones that blow up. So on the fun side though, what do you think, what's your favorite video that you've done that you feel like nobody got it? Like it didn't get any traction, no views, but I think this was gold, and it was, and it just didn't, like that's the one sitting in your account over there, and you're like, it has 20 views. I don't know what happened.
Actually, can I quickly check just so I can give you? Okay,
well,
thank you.
And actually, if you send me, if you share that video with me once you find it, I can bring that in and I can throw it into the video, and so we can watch it.
Thank you. Let me quickly check.
She's like, nah, none of my videos ever don't get views. Like this one was pretty bad. It only got like 5,000 views. It was pretty much nothing. I love the scale difference on that. Like I have a friend who's like legitimately making a living on TikTok. Like she makes tons of money, and she was talking about how like just we were talking at a gathering, and so I'm trying not to like give context for it because I don't want to I don't want to like name drop or whatever or out her, but she made a comment about one of her videos kind of flopping. She was like, oh, I know, like, I made this and I put so much effort and time into this, and then it only got like, a couple thousand views. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's rough. Wow. I can't imagine. I feel like I've never had anything clear. Yeah, I think, but probably my biggest one's like, 80,000 views or something like that. And that has happened like a handful of times in the hundreds of videos I've made where I've like, gotten into, a whole bunch of views like that. Every one of her things, it's like most of, if you scroll through her feed, most of them have like an M next to the thing. She's in the millions of views. She's got, like 100 million followers or something. I'm like, yeah, we're not operating on the same kind of scale here.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, that one kind of bombed because I only got 40 views. She's like, yeah, I've never had that happen. What's that like? Ouch. So.
But I can relate. Like most of my videos are kind of stuck. I think the highest view count that I have is like currently is like 2,500. So it's
really?
It's not a lot, yeah. But one of the videos. Yeah, one that I was actually very excited about, and it didn't get like. Usually, most of my videos go like, it has like 100 to 200 and something likes. Mm-hmm. And this was a video I made about books that I want to finish reading by the end of July.
Yeah.
And it only got like 83 likes.
Oh.
Which, yeah.
Well, share it, and I'll go on and like it for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll throw it in the video part of the podcast. We'll see if it translates to audio. But
okay.
Okay, Chané. Question to you: do you, and either way on this, totally fine. Do you have a life verse, or even better, just like a favorite Bible verse, something that you really connect with? I'm curious. Like, what's your go-to scripture favorite?
It's definitely Romans 8 verse 28. And I know a lot of people use Bible verses out of context, but I actually went and I looked at the context of this verse, and it's so amazing how what it comes to is how God can use even the bad things that happen to us for His glory. So that's just an amazing thing to hold on to.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, right there, and I think that if I'm understanding correctly, I think you have that context nailed, because people do take things out of context and use a verse like that to say, see, God gave you that horrible thing and it was for good. So instead of being upset or hurt by it, you need to know that that was great. That's not what that means. It means God can and will use absolutely anything for His glory. And if we trust Him through the rough stuff, we'll find that He brings us through to places where He is glorified in that, where He will use even the worst things. I had a friend who used the analogy of like coal. Like he'll take the blackest, darkest looking thing, but when He lights it up, when He adds His fire, His light to it, now it's lighting up the room. And so something that is just gets darkness and blackness on everything and makes it seem like this is horrible and a mess and dirty, can be used by God to bring light and to shine His glory. So yeah, absolutely. I love that. Okay. Final thing to anybody out there on TikTok or around South Africa or anywhere else, for those who are questioning whether they've been raised Christian like you were and just wondering, like, is this really legit? Or just for anybody who's kind of wondering about the truth and maybe hearing some of that and going, all right, that sounds interesting, but really, why? Why do you say it is worth it to follow Jesus?
Well, I just think that the amazing thing about Jesus is that following him, you have really you don't have anything to lose, but you have everything to gain, and not in a materialistic sense, but joy, peace, all of these things that God will provide, strength through difficult times. It's amazing how, since I've become a true Christian or follower of Jesus, it's just amazing how, even in difficult situations, I do have anxiety. So in difficult situations, because I have anxiety, it's kind of hard to just lay it all in front of God and just, yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes, but the peace that God has provided to me, even though I have anxiety, it's amazing. And yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. And God is good, even in those times. And that connects back to that verse you shared, Romans 8:28, that he's good in the midst of those things. And, I believe you've made some videos about anxiety and stuff, right? On TikTok.
Yeah.
And going through that. And that's awesome. I love that, that willingness to, you can be kind of lighthearted or make kind of a funny video about it too, but then just to say like, yeah, this is part of being human, is struggling with things, going through stuff. Not everything's always glorious all the time. And yet God is good, and trusting him through that and being okay with knowing, hey, not everything's perfect, but we have a perfect God. We have a God who is capable of anything. And so to trust him in that, I think, is a really powerful testimony to the people around us. They go, oh, well, how come you don't fall into absolute despair? And you're like, I have this anchor, right? That's what it says in Hebrews, that hope is the anchor for the soul. It keeps us from drifting too far into craziness and unbelief. That Jesus, the hope in Christ, is that anchor for us. So that's awesome, dude. I really appreciate you coming on here, but I really enjoy your content, and I'm not just blowing smoke, not just making that up. I really do. When I see your stuff come through, I always like check, and I'm like, make sure the audio's on. Like, okay, let's hear how this went, and it's almost always something great. So I really enjoy following you on TikTok. It's good stuff. What's your? We'll put your handle in the description so people can connect. If anybody wants to connect with you, definitely on TikTok. Is there anywhere else or anything else you have going on, a YouTube channel, Instagram, anything like that, where you want to drop a plug or a podcast? I don't know. What do you got?
I have Instagram and of course TikTok. So my Instagram handle is, quickly check. My Instagram handle, for anyone who wants to know, is Chané _0_3.
All right.
Yeah.
So Chané, man, this has been fun for me. I'm enjoying this. I enjoy the I enjoy the accent. I appreciate your heart in this, and just your joy, and just your presence in who you are. It's been fun chatting with you, and I really appreciate, and I do want to point out for anybody who's been listening to this, if you've made it to this point in the podcast, since this isn't your first language, I know you've said a couple of times, like, I don't know the word, like, and processing through. I appreciate the effort. Thank you. I know so in reverse, when I've been in situations where I've, like I said, I speak some Spanish, and I spent a semester abroad in a Spanish speaking country, and it is really hard to express yourself when like every thought in your head is coming through in a different language. You're like, but how do I say that in this one? And so I know that's, 10 times as much mental work just to have the conversation and to make your point clear. So I really appreciate all of that effort too, for all of this, just to talk about Jesus and what he's done and how that's working out in your life, and different hemispheres, different, what's the top? Yeah. North, south, different sides of the globe. It's, now, just barely daytime here. It's the end of the day on your end, and yet all over this planet, God is good, and he's amazing.
He is.
And he's doing
Amen.
great things.
Yeah.
So, Chané, thanks so much for being on the Be Rad for Jesus podcast with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that's it for this week's episode of the Be Rad for Jesus podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've stuck around this long, you either hate us so bad you want to find out where to complain, or you really loved it and you want to come back for more. I want to tell you how to do that. You can go to beradforjesus.com, and we have links to everywhere you can stream and subscribe to our podcast. We have episodes, we have show notes, all on there, where you can find us on anchor.fm or on the Anchor app. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. And if there's another platform that we don't offer yet, hit us up on the website or through Anchor and let us know where you listen to podcasts and where you would like to hear or engage with this. If you do enjoy the podcast, would you consider leaving us a review, leaving us a rating, sharing it with a friend, posting it on social media, and or even going above and beyond and supporting this podcast? You can do that on Anchor, and that would for sure help us make more episodes of this podcast, because caffeine definitely fuels just about everything we do, almost as much, but not quite as much, as the Holy Spirit and our love for Jesus. That said, I hope you have a rad day. Go out and do something incredible. Be rad for Jesus, because following Jesus is radically different and radically awesome.